Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can find at theoryofdfs.com. Since Eric Beinfor is still stuck in the best ball streets, tweeting out lineups that have no running backs in them, getting guests on the show, coming to us from his new site, Run the Sims. It's Justin Freeman, formerly known from the captain spot. Last year, you were the Showdown guy. You were the guy I would listen to for 15 minutes, like 3 times a week, and you'd tell me, I ran 10,000 simulations, and this guy shows up in the optimal lineup X% of the time, and then you do that, and it's NFL Showdown, so you can't expect anything.
Yeah, all hell breaks loose, and I gotta say, you must be getting really far down the guest list at this point for Eric replacements when you get to bringing me on. But I appreciate you having me hop on. But yeah, the Showdown stuff was fun last year. I will say, like, obviously, I can't complain to you about content responsibilities. I mean, you're a freaking machine, but doing those 3 shows and prepping for that every week, in addition to like everything else going on, man, that was like so much fun for about 7 weeks, and then like week 8 comes by and you're like, I still got a long way left this season, but it was fun. Like Showdown's been a lot of fun to try to like decode, so to speak. There's like just so much nuance to it, and we've learned so much already in a short period of time, like with Showdown, but I feel like there's still a lot of meat on that bone.
Well, you talk about the content machine. See, I'm not like Pete Overzet. See, like this NFL season, I think I'll be doing 8 shows a week. So like the DFS pregame show, 11 in the morning, I'll probably do Monday through Friday. Then the Advanced Sports Analytics show, if it comes back on Thursdays. Then I do my Saturday stream where I yell at everyone. And then maybe I end up on Sunday mornings on Roto Grinders once in a while. So, but to me, that's what I enjoy doing. See, Pete does a million different things. Like typically my shows are typically like I do this podcast and the pregame show. It's all built around kind of game theory in and of itself. So it's like kind of one topic, and I'm just beating it to death. But like Overzet, he has to switch gears like 3 times a day.
He's got a personality disorder, I think, that he can do all those different things and do them well. Like I don't do any one thing as well as Pete does all things. Like it's pretty awesome.
So Run the Sims. I listened. You were recently on Lulls, the podcast with Overzet and Brian Hooper, and Brian grilled you as expected, because he's going to be like what goes into your mathematical processes. But this show is all built around game theory. To me, it's weird. The similarities and differences to how I approach the game and how what I call projection people approach the game. Like we're using the same exact like tools, the same exact methodologies, just that the mindset of how you build lineups is from the complete opposite directions. So, for instance, Run the Sims. You're talking when we say the word Sims, we're not talking about the game that my wife plays on her computer, right? We're not talking about.
They're killing me for SEO right now, though. I have to get past the Sims in order to rank high on Google.
And she plays that a lot. She always complains on the Sims. She builds an art studio, and people keep on fucking in her bathroom. Like constantly. Dude, she's constantly complaining because it's like you said it to public or something, and people are going through her trash. They're having sex in the bathrooms. She's like I have art for sale. Like get out of here.
Should she put a sign on the door or something?
Right.
I don't know.
But your site has nothing to do with the Sims video game.
No, very, very little. Although I guess we are talking about some reality where you get to find out any of a number of possible outcomes for something. But basically, like the short elevator pitch of the entire premise of the site is let's get away from baseline projections, meaning median projections, and let's actually understand things in terms of range of outcomes. And I'm not the first person to be talking about range of outcomes by any means. Most places are referencing that in one way or the other, but we're trying to be a bit more precise with that. So we're going to simulate play-by-play every game on every slate 10,000 times. In other words, go through game 1, Every single player, like if it was a Madden simulation, and at the end of that game, you got to collect the box score for every player. And then we just ran that Madden simulation 10,000 times for every game on the slate. And then you get some pretty powerful information for that. Obviously, you'll get a full range of outcomes for every player, fully correlated with his own teammates and that sort of thing. But then we can also optimize each simulation run and say, well, hey, in simulation number one, the nut lineup looked like this. In simulation number two, it looked like that. And then we can find some unique combinations of players and some optimal rates for each of those players. So overall, it's kind of like taking the things that we're intuitively doing in our head and putting actual numbers to that to hopefully make our decisions a little bit easier. But obviously you're the game theory guy, so taking it that second level then I think is where there's real meat on the bone.
Right. I want to get into the game theory stuff and how on what I believe your site should be that it isn't. Right? Like
Yeah.
we had a conversation before. It's like that this is the I would find this useful. It's like no, we're doing this, which is also
Right.
useful, but
Yeah.
it's from the two different sides. So first let's talk about the simulation methodology. Play
Sure.
by play versus like a Monte Carlo type of method. Now, the benefits of the play by play based simulation is that you don't have to worry about like any type of correlation coefficients because they're
Exactly.
obviously you're doing it play by play. You don't have to have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill are correlated 1.48 and then when you run out the Monte Carlo all of them have to, match up that way because you obviously can't have from a if you think from a very common sense point of view, Patrick Mahomes can't have a 440-yard, 5-touchdown game while Tyreek Hill is 2 for 18 and no touchdowns. Right? It's less like I guess that Byron Pringle could have 300 yards. I guess it could happen. But when you do it play by play, it's naturally correlated because each play has to. I mean, a 14-yard pass to Tyreek Hill, like you get the correlate, the target shares and everything in there, like you get that already. The downsides to it, at least from my experience, is the time, and in order to simulate that, and according to what you said on Lulz, you're doing it in Go, which is obviously not used as much. Typically, most people do it in R or Python. But you said, I mean, you could simulate 10,000 instances of a game in 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's that's simulations and optimizations on top of that. So it's pretty unbelievable speed to the point where when my guy Mike told me how long it was taking him to run these sims, I assumed something was horribly wrong. Well, we had gotten this wrong because we were converting this over from an R program into a Go program, and no way you just ran this whole slate in 16 seconds or whatever. And I go back and check, and I'm looking at every single box score and in every single play, and they're right. It's the exact same logic and stuff. And so it's a super fast product. And the Mike, our engineer who's put that together, is a super talented guy. So he's able to get a lot of things going at the same time instead of progressing through things linearly. But anyway, that's pretty nerdy part of this. But overall, it's unbelievably fast. And so I used to spend, I mean, I can't tell you, Jordan, like probably 20 hours a week, like running simulations through, I've got the Thursday night slate coming up. It's Tuesday, but I need to get some preliminary stuff out there so people have something to look at. So I'm going to run it then. And then I'm going to run it for the FanDuel slate. And then I'm going to run it for, again on Wednesday. And then like 5 or 6 different times on Thursday. And then I'm going to do it again for the Sunday night showdown. And then again for the Monday night showdown. And it's like, all I'm doing is asking my computer to run simulations for like legitimately 20 hours a week. And now that process will be a web-based app, and it'll be running in a matter of seconds, and anybody can do it. So it's pretty cool. I guess I've punted away whatever edge I have. I had a pretty decent year in Showdown. Nothing like no $1 million prize, no solo millies or anything like that. But I also probably play it a bit more conservative than GTO.
So for these simulations, obviously, when you simulate, it's the same thing as any variable based like computation that it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Like it all comes down to the numbers that you're putting in. Now in NFL numbers, you're either coming up with in two different ways. right? You're either regressing past data, or you're setting it. You're setting a target share of 22%
Yeah.
as the median, or the rushing share. How many plays are there going to be in the game, right? That type of thing. Uh,
Hmm.
so it could be very subjective, which the NFL could be in a 17, 18-week season. Like even the
Yeah.
data sizes, the sample sizes are small enough that the margin of error is quite large. Now
Yeah.
on your site, you're obviously putting in some type of baseline. I'm assuming for week 1, week 2, for a classic slate, that you're monitoring the news and you're personally putting in, this is what I believe. It's very similar to like Derek Hardy, right? He has the
Yep.
blitz. So
Yep.
he's coming up with his projections in a similar way that you're
Right.
coming up with your baseline for that week or whatever. You believe there's going to be, based on whatever, there's going to be 64 plays on this end and 58 plays on that end, and all the variables put together, and here's the target shares, here's the rushing shares, here's all of that
Yep.
type of stuff. uh, you're giving access for people to, to change that. Essentially,
Yes.
the goal of your site is for people to be able to put their input in, and not only have that, like, it's not going to just change a projection by a percentage, like you
Hmm.
would see on maybe a more rudimentary model of, oh,
Hmm.
you can move a slider up and down, and that'll change, based on the variable's weight, 3% this way and 1.5% that way. No, you're
Yeah.
allowing people to go, well, I think this receiver is going to have 4%. You think it's 21%. I think it's 25%. And then
Hmm.
obviously you take away the percent from some other people and you
Yep.
even it out. But at that point, how do you simulate without having your own program? Like, your goal is for you to now put in all of your stuff and then still be able to do 10,000 simulations of the game. So if someone just wanted to research, for instance, let's say there's a high variance situation, right? Let's say we have like an injury status. We have like one of those things where Julio Jones, right? I know he's on the Titans, but last year on the Falcons, he's
Hmm.
questionable. And you're like, well, Calvin Ridley could have this target share. You could also have a much higher target share. Like
Yeah.
Zacchaeus could have, like, you don't know which way it's going to go. You have the option. If you go to any other site, most projections are like, this is what we believe.
Right. We
And
picked this thing.
right, and until Julio Jones is ruled out, we're just going to assume that Julio Jones is. They either set it so that Julio Jones has his normal target share, or find some middle,
That
give
hedge.
an
Right.
injury designation of he's out 20% of the time, so let's take off 20% and give everyone else 20%, and then have some like middle ground, that median, that mean type of
Right.
ground. Well, with your site, I could go in on Friday night and say, I want to run a 10,000 sim on if Julio's out,
Yep.
if Julio's in but only gets a certain snap count, or is in full, and then see the differences between like who gets affected the most and who's more likely to appear in optimals based on that. So do you think that's the two questions here? It's a double-edged sword, Justin. Do you think the best selling point of your tool, of your site, is the ability to do things like that versus the fact that 95% of the playing audience that plays DFS, am I that interested? I want you to tell me what the target share is. And at the end of the day, if I subscribe to your site and never adjust anything, isn't it the same as me just downloading your projections?
Yeah, if you didn't want to adjust anything at all, it's not completely different than having available projections. I suppose the one thing we could tell you, though, that I don't believe anybody else is telling is an optimal rate. And to me, that is a very powerful number. And granted, the goal of playing even in the Millie Maker isn't necessarily to play the nut lineup. Now, granted, we'll take it, right? But you'll get some weird results trying to chase a nut lineup. So we lower our expectation down just a little bit. But yeah, overall, I think this would really cater to somebody who thought they had a better read on it or wanted to do more advanced research like ahead of time. And for me, that's always been something I'm super interested in because like I don't care about the fringe instance where we're we're like the hedge of the Julio hedge, where we think, we're kind of thinking he's either going to play or not going to play, and we're going to kind of take a little bit away from him to show, like that situation is not going to happen. He's either going to play or he's either not going to play.
Right. That's not going to be a normally distributed outcome range.
Why don't you tell me? You figure it out and you plug it in. And the fact that it's so quick means you can change a lot of things on the fly, and I think that's fun. So like, it can essentially serve as a proxy for your own weekly projections, and do with those what you will. We'll have an optimizer there on site, but you could upload that potentially anywhere. But so I think there's a lot of potential uses. I think
and hold on a second. So if you do change everything and run, and so on the site itself, I could change anything I want, and in 30 seconds get the simulation of 10,000 of whatever I changed.
Yes.
Okay, so it's running on you're using like AWS or something. It's running. It's not the type of thing where
server,
like you submitted,
not on your computer.
Right. This is something that's as fast as an optimizer in the industry would be.
Yeah.
Right, because when I think of simulations, like I've done work in Excel, and let me tell you, 30 seconds for 10,000 simulations is like you said. I would think something's wrong if it was that fast, because with my skills, 10,000 would take all day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Like I was telling Brian and Pete this, like I started in this with an Excel model, and because that's the language that I'm native to, right? And with some help of some smart people, we got it put into R, and it was, it ran in an hour, and that was so cool. And now it's like we've kind of stepped it up a notch even more and put some diesel fuel into the tank. But it's been so it's really cool. Like if you think about the fact that you can run simulations that quickly, you really can think about a lot of potential use cases for that. And it has some trickle down, not only in DFS, but obviously season long prop betting, that sort of stuff too.
Right, and the nut lineup, that percentage you're looking for, it's very similar. Like other sites have similar type of methodologies, and you really and truthfully, you need to know what the methodology is to understand what these numbers mean, because they're slightly different. So, like on RotoGrinders, we have something called the smash percentage. But the smash percentage is all based around a normal distribution and a Monte Carlo method. So basically, it's individual player based. So there's no correlation attached to it. So it's basically saying that here, the player's median is 17, and his 84th percentile outcome is 29. And it's like, if we ran this slate 10,000 times, like how often does he reach whatever value you believe, some type of multiplier. A lot of times it's like 4x plus 10, depending on the sport, certain like 5x plus 7. And you could set it doesn't matter what that number is. Like, you need to know what that smash percentage number even is. Like, what is that multiply? Like, what is it? And if you want to change it depending on the contest that you're playing, well, you don't need, like in basketball, a lot of times it's like you need like 5x plus 10 for like large field tournaments. For an individual player, especially in basketball where there's not much correlation to care about anyway. But maybe for a small field contest, you'd rather have the smash percentage be 4x plus 7 or something.
Right.
Like, knowing that. And then you also we have like top stack percentage, like that type of thing. But that's more based on a contest-based methodology of running a contest out and seeing what lineup appears in the winning lineup. You're doing it based on a nut lineup. So what we would call the optimal. Basically the highest scoring lineup possible within the salary and positional constraints for all the players put together. Right? So like it's not the highest scoring running back or the highest scoring wide receiver. You may not be able to get, if they're all expensive players, they may not be able to fit in one, or they could fit in one lineup, but you're playing a $2,500 guy that gets 1 point, and it would have been a better construction had you played something else. So basically what you're doing is doing that knapsack problem.
Exactly.
At the end.
It's a constraint problem, and it's called linear programming for anybody who's wanting to read up on that. And basically, you're going to define what your constraints are. I need a 9-person lineup with exactly 1 quarterback, anywhere between 2 to 3 running backs, 3 to 4 wide receivers, 1 to 2 tight ends, and a defense. And I need it to stay $50,000 or less, and you're going to maximize on the simulated DraftKings points for that week, for that slate. And you're right that it's going to be different what your objective is based on slate size. So the fact that we can optimize on any slate now is going to change. You have a very different number for the Sunday main slate optimal rates versus what you'd have for the afternoon only optimal rates. If Derrick Henry's in the afternoon only slate, he may be like 20% optimal on the main slate, but 50% optimal on the short slate, right? Because who else does he have to compete against anymore? So he doesn't even, it takes away like how much of a ceiling do you have to have on those types of slates. So the fact that it's dynamic on the slate, I think helps out a lot.
How are you doing the defenses?
Defenses suck, but I mean it's simulated based on known sack rate, known pressure rate, interception rate of the passer that they're playing against.
Okay, but you're still doing it you're still doing it the play by play.
Play by play.
So when you simulate the game, the defense gets a certain amount of points. Okay, so it's still within the same type of you're simulating a sack, you're simulating an interception,
exactly.
Okay, so it ends up being the same thing. And we both know defenses in NFL on a week-to-week basis is you throw up your hands, just whatever. I mean, like, it's gonna be highly variant.
Yeah, so we'll have some stuff in there to basically disincentivize people from spending a lot of money on defense.
Okay, now comes the difference between the way that I play and the way that what you're developing, to me, views as how to build your own projections.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so to me, I come from the other end of the spectrum. I assume that I can't beat anyone's projections. Like, I just assume that as long as I have a reasonable, like, the differences between projections, NFL may be a little bit more subjective, obviously, but in a large sample size, I don't believe that I could build a model that's better than Cardi, that's better than Brian Hooper, that's better than Ricky D, better than whoever else is playing. If I can, it would take me a long time, and maybe I'll have a 1% advantage. Like I believe that around the industry, what's publicly available, you're probably going to pay for it. Like, if I just use your base projections that you do, and you put in you do all the work for me, and you just spit out the numbers, like, I could use that. I don't have to worry about the football element of it. You're going to take that interception rate for the defense. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about any of that. And your projections, if I looked at Osimo's projections, shouldn't be that dramatically different. Right? Shouldn't be. I mean, the good teams, the good players. It's not all that complicated. You may have a slightly different opinion, 2% different way on a rushing or carry or a target share, but that 2% difference,
injury or something like that would be the biggest things. Yeah.
Right. But in 150 lineups, if you're building, the 2% difference could mean the difference of me having that player in only 7 lineups versus you having that player in 58 lineups. But in the projection, that's really all that's different. So for me, the biggest tool that is not available, as far as I know, someone please tell me if it is, because I'll be using it. And I just want to preface this. This is not sponsored content. Like, Justin, I brought you on because I respect what you do. Am I ever going to use Run the Sims? Maybe, maybe not. But this is not a recommendation. It's just, this is what it does. And if you want to use it, use it. If you want to have it part of your arsenal. If you want to, hey, I subscribe to many sites just to see what other people are looking at. Right? I mean, to me, especially with my approach, I need to know what everyone else is doing, so it determines what I do. So to me, it may be useful for that. But I don't want to come across as like, no, you got to be using this tool. I'm going to be using this tool. Like
I'll be that person in this conversation.
Right, you'll be that person. But like I said, I wouldn't have you on if I didn't respect what you did to begin with. I mean, if I didn't believe that your tool was useful at all, I wouldn't have asked you. I wouldn't even ask you on anyway.
Right.
What I would want, you're simulating games, and you're comparing that to an optimal nut lineup.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to simulate is the expected value of exact lineups. So I want to be able to, for instance, you already have the projections. So I don't need you to play by play anything. It's just like, nope, it's already there. Give me the percentile outcomes. So like you've simulated 10,000 slates, 10,000, and you have that median, right?
Yep.
You have the percent. What's the 40th percentile? What's the 60th percentile? How is that correlated to one another? And then put those in lineups with the ownership that I give you. And I say, I want Tyreek Hill 16% owned. I want, this guy 12%. I'll put in the ownership. Or you could project the ownership if you want as a baseline. But I'll put in the ownership.
You're wanting the owner, your preference ownership, or you're wanting what everybody else is doing? Which of those two?
Well, what I project is
it as exposure or as ownership.
No, not exposure. I'm talking about ownership. So I'm going to project the ownership.
Okay.
Of all the, I could go to Roto Grinders and just grab their ownership. I could go to Osmo, I could grab whatever I want. Just to give me the ownership, and based on those ownerships, create all the lineups in the Millie Maker. Obviously, that's the biggest contest. Mm-hmm. And then I want to be able to put in a lineup and tell me after 10,000 simulations of the Millie Maker, how much money does this lineup make?
That's good. Yeah, I did.
And what's the standard deviation of that lineup? So, for instance, you may have lineups that, for instance, in the Millie Maker with a 15% rake, show like for every dollar you put in, you get 17 cents on top. So it's $1.17, right? So let's say it's a $20 entry and you get whatever the percentage is.
If it's a penny, then you've got a positive EV lineup. Right,
you got a positive EV lineup, but then you need to know the standard deviation, and you see that in 10,000 simulations, it never comes in the top 100, right? So like that EV, you're slightly positive, but it's more of a min cash type of, like, you're unlikely to win, but if you play enough times, you could squeak out a little bit. Now, there aren't that many of those lineups because the rake is so high. So you could now simulate so I don't want to simulate the games. I want to simulate the contest. So instead of the Millie Maker, I want to take the SPY. Now, obviously, the ownership in the SPY is going to be different from the ownership in the Millie Maker. So now I'm going to switch all the ownerships, right? Or you could give me a baseline if you want to do that computation. And what the Sims believe.
In this situation where I'm creating these fake lineups, right? I'm creating dummy lineups based on the ownership you provided. I've also got to have some rules on how construction's done too, right? To be able to make that work.
Right, because most lineups that have Tyreek Hill have Patrick Mahomes. Because that's why the doing ownership product for correlative sports isn't like completely accurate. Because like in baseball especially, you take baseball. And it's like, if you're going to play the Dodgers, and Max Muncy is 22% owned and Mookie Betts is 18% owned, that doesn't mean that, a lot of that 22% is also with Betts. It's not a 1v1 type of, it's 40% of lineups have one Dodger of those two Dodgers in it. It's no, it's much less than that, because same thing in football, where, a quarterback wide receiver are much more likely to be paired up together. And also, the more owned the quarterback is, the more owned the two of them together are. Right? You may have an Allen Robinson.
Lineups that don't have Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill in
it. Right, exactly.
Exactly. So you have to figure in some logic like that, loop it through, but that could be done. That's actually a pretty exciting idea.
No, Justin, I know it can be done. I mean, the point that I'm making is that a tool like that is not publicly available. And then I could also, for instance, let's say you had the ability on top of that. So you select, on your site, you select the major contests on DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, SuperDraft, whatever. There doesn't have to be any. I mean, obviously you can make a custom one, right?
Sure.
Somewhere down the line where you can put in any amount of entries, any amount of whatever. But let's say you just pulled and say, I'm going to put in the basic settings for the SPY, for the Power Sweep 3 Max, for the $9 slant, for the Millie Maker, and on FanDuel, that whatever kind of 5 or 6 main contests there, the Mini Max, or whatever it is. And then now you have the total entries, the payout structure because you're pulling that. And then you basically you're going simulation 1 of the whole. So you're taking the play-by-play data.
We've already got it.
You already got it, right. So you already got the 10,000 simulations of that. So you're now just grabbing games and just running putting them all together in a matrix and then running the contest what lineup wins, what lineups, what players are in those lineups, how often does a player show up in the top lineup? Not the nut lineup, because most people, you're not going to have the nut lineup in a lot of times because it's a weird lineup. How many times does this player show up in like the top 0.1% of the field? What stacks? Like you go, well, does a 3-1 construction? Does a 3-2 construction? Now you could go by construction type, but you're all basing it around what wins this specific contest. And then based on now, in one simulation, this lineup comes in 362nd place. The next one, it comes in 76,000th place for no money. Right. And then you're taking the 10,000 simulations, averaging out the payouts, and then going per simulation, your expected value is X. And then, what you could add on top of that, Justin, is kind of a rewind feature where once you have, because now we're going by projected ownership and your projections and your simulations. Now, what happens if I want, after the fact, put in all of my 150 lineups in the $9 slant? Now we know what the actual ownership is. You already know now you could pull the CSV, you know all the lineups. Like, you don't have to simulate the ownership and guess the lineups. You know the actual lineups. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that I could do anything about it because all the players are locked. But now, after the fact, I can now take my lineups and use whatever projection set I want to use. I load in my custom projections, and now I want to have basically give me 10,000 simulations of the contest now that we know all the actual lineups and my projection set, and then tell me like if my 150 lineups in the $9 slant cost what is that? $1,350? You could say based on 10,000 simulations, you average get back $1,575. Or like, and here are your lineups that are plus EV. Here are all your lineups that were minus EV based on based on the projections that I put in, and then your simulation server that allows me to now replay the contest 10,000 times. Does this sound like something that would be highly useful?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree completely with that. That's and the hindsight tool there would be really cool, because then it's like, before you go into any contest, you're guessing on, all of the assumptions that are in the projections in the first place. So you're guessing on the projections, but you're also guessing on ownership. Now, once ownership becomes crystallized, and to me, ownership's a much tougher thing to get a grasp on than projected fantasy points. I think that's super, super cool, because I would say the vast majority of DFS players have no clue, myself included, maybe, whether or not they have just created a positive EV lineup when they click submit. Because, okay, does my lineup have a stack? Does it have a bring back? Does it have secondary correlation? Did I fade a majority owned player? What are the things that I would feel like the boxes I would need to check off for a lineup? And obviously it's going to depend on the contest. But sometimes it's really hard to know, because you don't get to run that thing out 10,000 times to know whether it was plus EV or not.
Right, I don't. But to me, publicly available. Now, I'm saying the word publicly available because what I'm describing does exist. Right?
I'm sure.
Yeah. And to put all things into perspective, I do have a way of doing something very close to that myself. It's not accurate. It's really bad, but I mean it's directionally accurate enough. The point being is that you could understand from my approach, I look at what you're doing as, how could we better project players? And I'm coming from the game theory approach of how could I better project the contests?
Right.
So I know that in the 20 max, the play action with God knows how many entries, there's a lot of bad there's a lot, like the ownership is very inefficient comparison to the win equity of a lineup, right? A lot of people are either playing really non-correlative garbage lineups that like have almost no ceiling to get all the way and beat 150,000 entries, or they're playing ones that have like the maximum amount of min cash equity, and yet they'll like you have really bad lineups and then you have just bad lineups. But those min cash lineups, if you ran them 10,000 times, you'd see an EV of like 0.96. It's like you're losing like 20% of your money.
You're paying the rate,
right? Yeah, you make cash more often, right? You make cash 4 out of 10 times, but you're never getting past 1.5x or 2x, 3x often enough that you're making money at it 10,000 times. And then you also have lineups that win the Millie Maker once because it's so fucking weird.
Yeah.
And then like 99,000 other times, it's like so far behind. Now in the Millie Maker, obviously, if you win it once out of 10,000, you're profitable, right? But maybe not in the $9 slant, right? So so those types of lineups would show up as higher expected value than like some of the safer but plus EV lineups, but their standard deviation would be like 5 times as high. So like to compare it to baseball, or we could say about football, like if a team is like a 15-point underdog and you're like, I'm gonna super stack the underdog, right? I'm gonna play the jet stack against the Chiefs, and I'm gonna play the quarterback, both wide receivers, and the tight end with no run back. Right, so it's like it's playing for like the instance of the Jets like going out and beating them 31-0, which doesn't happen that often, but it may happen once in the 10,000 sims, and it comes in third place in the Millie Maker, and you're like, well, and then maybe it makes that lineup because of that slightly profitable.
Yeah.
But the standard deviation would be so high that you'd be able to find 50,000 other lineups that would be, better than that. Like to me, what I'm describing is, what truthfully I think is basically DFS 3.0 when it comes to content. That once that's publicly available, then we're going to start seeing people drop out of the ecosystem.
Well, cool. I'll work on that next. That may be a year 2 thing before we get to it.
But you see how why that to me that's the whole, like, if you have accurate projections and you have accurate player projections, as accurate as possible, as accurate ownership projections, all that comes down, the thing that you should be simulating is not the games, but the actual contests. And then now you have the ability. For instance, let's say on your site, it's a 10, 12 game NFL slate, and I don't even want to use your projections. I want to upload my own percentile projections, but I want to use your service to simulate stuff, even if it's just a Monte Carlo method with the simple correlation matrix. And I want to use that, and then I'm going to give you the ownerships of all the players, and I just want to just run this contest and show me if I could sort by show me all the lineups. Show me the lineup that returns 64 cents on the dollar. Show me the one that shows 63. Just show me all the line, and now I could go through and go, I want that lineup, I want this lineup, I want that, and show me all the lineups with Chiefs stacks. Show me all the lineups with Viking stacks. And then you could compare the two and go, based on the standard deviation and the expected value, go, okay, I want 5 of these lineups, I want 10 of these, and maybe it turns out that a player that projects well, because this is all based around relative value, because like in the simulation, if Derrick Henry has a bad game and he's 30% owned, like the score for that slate and that simulation for the content, the Millie Maker winning score is going to be much lower, which means that it's quite possible my garbage Lions stack, like that actually has a plus expected value in those cases. And then and if you could do that in 30 seconds now, where I could just run contest simulations like that, like to me, truthfully, to me, you'd have to charge a lot of money for that.
Yeah, and that's funny trying to figure out price point for something like this, because what you've described honestly is you're talking about providing your own ownership for specific contests and stuff. That's a pretty small group of people in and of itself, right? And
but you could do it. You could have an algo and do it. Do it yourself. I mean, you could provide a baseline like you do with the regular projections. But all I'm saying is that what I'm describing is what I attempt to do. It's just that what I want is to not spend 2 years doing it. And still not being as good as other players and just paying you $500 for it.
Right.
It's the same reason why I pay for the bad projections.
It's the entire process, from start to finish, because we've now got the projection, we've got the simulation of what the players are going to do. Now we're simulating not only ownership but actual lineups of what the other people are going to do, and now we can simulate that slate. Now, I will warn, 10,000 simulations sounds like a lot, but for something like a Millie Maker,
It's
not a ton of runs there. You probably still have no idea how often you should hit that, top prize.
Why do you think I just said that I have a process that's directionally
Close.
accurate, but
Right.
not because I can't like I said, 10,000 simulations that would 10,000 would take me all day,
Hmm.
and I'm playing what I mean. Maybe in football you could do it because it's a weekly type of thing, but in baseball, like I don't have like what am I get 100. I mean, like we have pitchers that change a half an hour before the slate fucking locks, right? We have starting lineups that aren't out. It's like what can I possibly run for any extended sample size? To me, I just need some directionally accurate.
Right.
Like
Well, the thing is, you're running these simulations in your head, and you're handling it the best you can, and you're forecasting out not only what these players are going to do, you're forecasting out which players are going to do well at the same time as other players, and then also what other people are going to do and react to that same piece of information, and you're dealing more abstractly and vaguely, but you're doing the same thing mentally, and so hopefully this helps put a fine point pencil on quantifying it somehow.
right. Well, I just want to be more. I just want to be more efficient with it.
Exactly.
But with my approach, my approach isn't any different from anyone else's. It starts the problem from the other end.
Right.
Right. I go with the assumption. Like this is what most people don't get about what I teach and what I do is that it assumes efficient projections.
Right.
Like it assumes that I'm going to assume that everyone has that information. So if everyone has that information, how do I get an edge? Overlook building lineups based on just that information. Like how you can't have an edge. So all I have to do is figure out how people are deviating from what we already know to do things irrationally. And then how do I benefit from that? It's like, well, this guy should be in 14% of lineups, but he's going to be in 22% of lineups
Right.
because of narrative or people are more likely to build because it's a lot of times people are more likely to build safe lineups. A lot of times that's the main reason is not, well, the guy's owned because he's the best projected point per dollar player and he fits in more lineups. He'll show up in that nut lineup more often than not. But still, he'll still be overowned. He'll still be overowned enough that I find more equity in playing lineups without him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start from my approach, all I'm doing is looking for overowned and underowned players.
Right.
I don't care. I'm assuming the projection is accurate. I'm assuming even if I take the aggregate of multiple sources, that I could just simulate it out and I just go, who's overowned, who's underowned, and let me build lineups with a combination that equals a certain amount of ownership in total or in product with a certain percentile outcome chance, like 80th percentile or something, and then compare the two and just go which lineups. And well, that's how you calculate the expected value of a line. I mean, that's without without actually going through and simulating it out 100,000 times, you'll be directionally accurate. Your lineup is more likely to be plus EV. I don't know exactly how much EV, right? I could do 100. I could do 500 simulations. What's that going to tell me? 500? It's barely anything.
Right.
But I'm starting from that end. You're starting from the end of, well, what happens if you don't think 22% target share? Like I just don't even bother with, like, to me, I want to take the sports and knowledge end of it completely out of it and just outsource that to someone that obviously an ETR, Levitan, Silva, Leone. Look at what they do. I'm never gonna do what they do. You're gonna be able to give me a median target share for some guy. Like, let them. Why not just let them do it? And I know, and the thing is, I know that people are looking at that. Like that to me, that's the most valuable piece. Is kind of a double-edged sword, right? I don't want to do my own projections, so I outsource it to something that's publicly available, that a large group of people also use. Well, that's also a benefit to me because I also know that they're looking at it also.
Right.
So like
that's what they're
Right. So it's like that's the second level of like I'm using the same thing as everyone else, but they're building it without regard to what I'm doing. And I'm building it with complete regard that everyone else is looking at it. Right. So like for your, like I would sign up for your site just for the reconnaissance mission of,
yeah.
Right. If your site ends up, 10,000 subscribers and people are and 95% of your users are never changing your shares or anything, like, well, I know the projections that 10,000 users in my contest may be using and disregarding ownership, and now they're playing either they're playing good lineups that are actually unprofitable.
Let me ask you a question, Jordan, because this is one that I've struggled with. Let's say we think we're playing the slant, and Derrick Henry projects to be 40% owned in the slant, and we think that he is optimal 30% of the time. So
optimal meaning the nut lineup, you mean?
Nut lineup, 30% of the time. So obviously he is a strong play independently of ownership, right? And ownership suggests that he is still slightly or pretty substantially actually over-owned by 10%, right? So how would you adjust that if you're building 100 lineups, 150 lineups? Do you want to match the field? Do you want to match optimal? Or do
someone didn't buy my course.
I must not have made it to chapter 28.
Right. No, I don't think it though. I don't think in those terms. I think in terms of lineups.
Okay.
So like to me, over under field that's you're talking about diversification. Right? I don't get like, oh, he should be 30% owned. He's gonna be 40% owned. I'm gonna have 20% of him. Like, but if those lineups suck, who cares if I have 20%? What are the EV of each individual lineup? Are the Derrick Henry lineups profitable? If they're not profitable, then why should I have 20% of them? I could probably 0%. Yeah, but I could probably find Derrick Henry lineups that are more profitable than non-Derrick Henry lineups. But the Derrick Henry lineups that are profitable likely don't have. If there's some chalk stack or something, it probably doesn't have.
They contain something else unique about them.
Right. So let's say, for instance, in your example, Derrick Henry, efficient ownership is 30%. He's going to be 40% owned. Well, maybe there's a stack. There's a 3+1 in combination. A quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, run back, that in combination should be 1.2% owned in combination. And they're going to be 0.4% owned in combination, because obviously all together.
Now you use the Derrick Henry free square.
Right. Well, because I've already gotten all my leverage. I'm getting everything I need from that stack that I want. Now I just need to raise my projection. Is give me the highest probability in the rest of my lineup. So that Derrick Henry lineup may be way more profitable than a ton of non-Derrick Henry, like a non-Derrick Henry lineup. Let's say there's a non-Derrick Henry lineup with like the second highest owned stack. Let's say the Vikings, and you have Cousins. I'm saying all these names as if I'm not paying attention to NFL since last year. Cousins.
We know you're up on all the blurbs, Jordan. Don't.
Yeah, sure. Thursday before the first slate, I'll know who's on whose team. Let's say you have a Vikings, Cousins, Jefferson, Rudolph, or what Herb Smith.
There you go. You outed yourself.
Oh, I've outed myself. Whoever tight end for the Vikings. And let's say that combination is efficiently owned. Mm-hmm. Okay? Well, putting Derrick Henry in that lineup doesn't make as much sense. But let's say Dalvin Cook is slightly underowned. Right? Just slightly. Like he said, like he's gonna be 16% owned, and he should be 20% owned. Mm-hmm. And he put him in that lineup with the fairly efficient stack, and maybe a one-off wide receiver that is a little bit underowned. If you were to simulate that lineup versus the Derrick Henry, super mega chalk lineup with that 1% owned stack, that Derrick Henry lineup may end up being like 3 times more profitable than the lineup that seems to not have chalk. It doesn't. Maybe there's 3 chalk players that it doesn't have in it, but the players that it does have are not necessarily underowned enough that like you're giving up, let's say 8 points in median projection, but you're not really gaining that all that much. You're getting some leverage, But you're playing a lot of like 12% owned dudes and whatever, and it's just like maybe it's profitable. Maybe that lineup actually is plus EV by a small extent. But you could find Derrick Henry lineups that, you know, who knows? That have stacks in it that their 80th percentile outcomes happen often enough that the standard deviation of those lineups, obviously, Justin, would be high.
Right.
But if you ran it out 10,000 times, 100 for a small, maybe not the milli maker because 10,000 is not enough. But let's say you ran out the spy for a single entry contest. Maybe it turns out that, like in the spy, Justin, for instance, Derrick Henry, if he's 40% in the milli maker, he may be 55% in the spy. So now he's maybe way overowned in the spy. So maybe in the spy, that middle of the ground lineup, because it's a smaller field and the payout structure is a little bit flatter at the top, that the Derrick Henry lineup from the milli maker, which we showed has a high standard deviation but is way profitable than the non-Derrick Henry lineup, maybe in the spy it's the reverse. Yeah. Because it's only a 4,000 person field, and Derrick Henry being now even higher owned than what it is, you'd rather just not play. You maybe in the spy you don't find that many profitable Derrick Henry lineups, as opposed to the milli maker, which you go, it's such a large field. Yeah, but I mean, Derrick Henry's overowned, but not as egregiously overowned. Like he's still the highest projected running back. He's still the highest probability play. Yeah. So, but that's the difference between the contest. But without doing contest-based simulations, you're comparing it to some nut lineup that even for the milli maker you don't even need.
Right. For Showdown you need it, for sure.
Right, for Showdown you absolutely need it, yes.
And so that's where I think is a really cool use case for this. And I think obviously the optimal lineup as a figure, as a variable, has some.
It has value. No, I'm not saying it doesn't have value.
Yeah,
but if you're playing the Thunderdome, who cares when you're looking? Right. You should be looking. What you should be looking at that number in relation to other players, and not as some hard, like 9. If it says 9%, it's like, well, if one player says 10%, the other player says 5%. All you have to know is that it's 2 times. Exactly. The actual number. Like, you're never going to need the nut lineup. And then for the milli maker versus the spy, you would rather play more players that are towards the top end of that. And a guy that only appears in the nut lineup 0.2% of the time may be viable in a kind of chalky milli maker lineup. But, you don't that guy is not even necessary in this. Like, don't even bother.
Exactly. Yeah, just go ahead and knock that guy out of the entire player pool and don't worry about him anymore. But yeah, so Showdown, I think is very interesting. And that's where I think people could really play around. I would hope you would want to play around with essentially the game script, like the default game script, and see what happens in certain things and be like, listen, I'm going to create 20 lineups tonight. And this is the Chiefs blow out the Texans, and and the game looks kind of like this. And so if that script happens, then these are the 20 best lineups according to that script. And so we'll simulate out that slate, which is a 1-game slate, 10,000 times, and we're going to create 10,000 optimal lineups, and we're going to hand them over to you, and we're going to sort them for you in order of frequency. So if, lineup number 1 appears 175 times out of 10,000, then you've got 1.75% likelihood of hitting the nut lineup by playing that one, if whatever your assumptions are hold up. So to me, that's a pretty cool thing. Like that's getting close to being able to measure EV for Showdown.
Not necessarily.
Because you got to factor in dudes.
Yeah, that's what I want. Now here we go with the nut. There's another tool that you should be making. Do the same exact thing that you just said. Now, do I want to if that lineup wins is the nut lineup 1.75% of the time, but on average per contest is duplicated 217 times, what's the number I get? So I want to know the duplication factor. So I don't want to play maybe I can make it, you do the 10,000 simulations, and I only want to pull out the lineups that are the highest, because now you have to run ownership, and go any lineup that is duplicated less than 10 times.
Yeah.
Or calculate the EV, because it could be that a lineup that is duplicated 100 times just wins so much more often.
Exactly. Yes.
That you actually make a small profit playing it, even though when you do win, you win like $1,300 splitting it with like 200 people.
Right.
But it still ends up being a profitable lineup. But we both know that most of those types of lineups are actually unprofitable lineups.
Exactly, because it's not you and 45 friends. It's you and 4,500 friends that all happen to play that one lineup. So if you look at a Showdown lineup, short rule of thumb, if you look at a Showdown lineup and like it, you've got a terrible Showdown lineup.
Right.
So yeah, what I was doing last year is I'd get this little report, right, with captain, flex 1, flex 2, flex 3, flex 4, flex 5, salary. And what I would do is I'd create essentially a shorthand Duke predictor myself. And it's some sort of combination of, okay, how much salary was left on the table? That's going to weed out, obviously, quite a few people if it's more than $300 or $400, $500, and exponentially more if it's more than 1,000. How many players from each team were there? If it's a 3-3 construction, you might want to go back to the drawing board. If it's 5-1, you may have something unique, that sort of thing. Did you do something chalky like match a quarterback with his pass catcher? Because there goes a little bit of things everybody else was thinking about too. So essentially, you go through all these checklists of things, and you're like, okay, well, I just eliminated all the really good lineups, But that's kind of the idea to be plus EV and Showdown. It's not horribly dissimilar from a dice roll, and you've got to be a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, you should look at your spy lineup and be like, okay, I can see how this hits. You should look at your Showdown and be like, okay, it's going to take a weird game for this to hit, but that's what we're looking for, weird games.
Right, chaos.
Yeah, chaos theory.
Right. But I mean, I do that type of stuff by doing multiply ownership product and a correlation number, because obviously, quarterback, wide receiver are paired together. Right. Two running backs on the same team are rarely ever. Yep. And you could come up with a number. I could do that in Excel. Like I said, not completely accurate, but directionally accurate enough. And then you multiply it by the contest size.
Exactly.
And then you could just estimate, this lineup is on average going to be duped 4 times, right? It may end up being a unique. It actually may end up being a unique.
Right, or 12.
Or it could be duplicated 14 times.
Right.
But I mean, it's something. Basically it's a way for me to see, oh my God, this lineup is like 72. It's like,
that's the worst, when you open it up and you start checking against your friends in the tournament, and you realize that one lineup that you thought would have been very unique is now duped by 8 other people in a smaller field contest. That's the way I felt when, it was the Super Bowl. I played higher stakes that week, and I want to say like a 100-person contest, and I thought I had a really interesting construction that had a really good floor and a pretty good ceiling. And so while I have not described a tremendously positive EV lineup, which is another regret, the biggest regret I have is I opened it up and like 15 out of the 100 had my lineup, and I was like, oh gosh, this is a stone disaster, because now there's no way I have no path towards positive EV now that this is the information. So like every time the information changes, you have a different understanding as to whether you're plus EV or not. I thought I was plus EV when I entered the contest, and quickly realized I was not.
Right. Like most people, don't understand that. Like when I play MMA, which is very similar to Showdown because there's only so many options.
Yep.
For the large field stuff, especially, that like I'm either happy or sad before the first fight even starts.
As soon as the lock, yeah.
Right. As soon as lock hits, download the CSV, put it into Excel, go how many dupes, and the only reason that I'd be off on dupes is because I'd be off on ownership. I mean that's all of really what it comes down to. It's if I'm reasonably accurate on ownership, like that's why I could look at the own. All you have to do is show me the ownership, and I could tell whether or not how many of my lineups are unique or close to unique or under 10. Because it's like, well, okay, the guy that I projected to be 22% owned in Showdown is 24% owned. It's like, is that going to make that much of a difference? But sometimes it's like, oh, this guy's I'm projecting like a fourth wide receiver to be like 4.5% owned, and then he ends up being 12% owned. And it's like, damn, this killed like half my fucking lineups.
Right.
Like it didn't kill it. It's just that these lineups went from being anywhere from 1 to 4, as how many, to now being like 20 to 42. And it's like now I have a third of my lineups that are like tied 40 ways.
You think about sitting down at a blackjack table and your EV, as soon as you place the chips in front of you, is what, like minus 3% or something, give or take there?
No. And 1.2 if you play perfect basic strategy.
Perfect. Okay, there you go.
1 to 2%.
And then after that first card is flipped over in front of you, the EV changes there. It
dramatically.
Yeah,
if the dealer has a 6 showing, like, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. 6 showing versus an 8 showing, we got completely different expectations at that point. And then the second card comes and it changes everything all over again. Dealer shows her card, and you got a different expectation there. And so I think that's very similar when we're talking about lock. It's like that's half the game, is understanding the ownership implications of the decisions you're making, because we're guessing on ownership and we're guessing on projections. And we've got to, if we're way off on the ownership, then even if we nailed the projections, like we've made suboptimal decisions because we made faulty assumptions about what everybody else was doing, and this is a game of relative points.
Right. But that's my approach.
Mm-hmm.
But you see so many people that talk not incorrectly. Like, we have the Whistles Go Woo, right? He's the new hot guy in the scene, right?
That's right. Good for him.
He's mostly most sharper players, high volume players, are projections based. Mm-hmm. They build their own. Like I heard on Lulz that David doesn't incorporate like any game theory ownership element. He said he has a module or something that he could incorporate, but most of the time it's just like, I'm just gonna make my projections 1%, 2% better than yours, and just I'm gonna dump in $50,000 and give me 7%, like that type of mentality, which is great, which is fine if you gotta have a money machine like that. But with an extremely large bankroll, with an extremely large sample size, right? Because you're playing you have to max out every slate to realize enough real money in that advantage. You have to play.
And it's tougher as the stakes go up.
Right, but still, even if you do have that advantage, like, to realize that you need a large bank. You're gonna go through swings, right? Yeah. It's the natural variance. But if you're not in that position to realize your skill from the projections. And in order to realize that skill, you need to have better, like we're not just saying, oh, well, they're different projections. No, they need to be better. So I need to think in my head, am I going to beat Osimo's projections? Am I going to beat Whistle Goes Woo's project? Am I going to beat Brick's project? I can't see that am I going to beat Joe Schmo's projections that he's coming up with in his head? Yeah, yes, I could build a model that beats that. Yes, I could absolutely do that. I could probably, in my head, I could beat that, probably.
Right.
But at the highest level, am I ever going to get an edge on project? Like, is that a faulty way of thinking? Like,
well, what you mentioned, you need better projections, not just different projections. I don't know. Maybe just having different projections is enough of an edge.
No, but no. Different projections.
It's like you're going to luck box your way into.
Yeah, but that's not a winning strategy. What you're describing is that I'm going to naturally get leverage because my projections are worse.
Right.
And then luck into obviously you could do that, but if you simulated it out 100,000 times, you may still be a grossly unprofitable player. You may get lucky on one slate like that. So I make my living on playing less entries and relying on public projections, and just where is the inefficiencies in the market. That's why the biggest conundrum to me, Justin, is the contest selection.
Yeah.
Any time that I spend a little bit more time and simulate contests, like the way that I do it, I would need fucking days,
Mhm.
because it's not good. I'm not that great in Excel. Uh, uh, it always comes down to if I take CSVs from the high stakes. If I took the CSV in football from the SPY and then the $9 slant, or in baseball the 777 on DraftKings or whatever it is, and the 20 max or the $6 swing for the fences, and I just take the lineups that I would build for each type of contest and ran out the simulation, I'm 3 times more profitable simulated in the large field contest, even though my standard deviation is ridiculous. And it just comes down to, like, if I'm going to play in the higher stakes, I have to rely less on, like, it's kind of it's the paradox. When I
Mhm.
play low stakes, when I play the large field stuff, the ownership actually gets less efficient with the better plays. Like,
Right.
like we said before, Derrick Henry could be over-owned in the $9 slant and still be the best running back play because all the other running backs are over. Like he projects so
Right.
far better than everyone else that he should be 26% owned, and he's going to be 30% owned. But it's
Right.
still that 4% difference. Even if you
Yeah.
took that away, he's still the best projected. Like, relatively, he's still the best play in your
Right.
lineup. But once you go up to the SPY and he's 48% owned, now he's
You won't
easily
have a decision
not.
to make. Right.
Right. But because most of the high volume players are playing projection based, I'm gonna have the most accurate projections. To
Mhm.
me, in the smaller field, in the smaller stakes, bigger field stuff, I'm much more inclined to. This is the weird way of how I always put it. I'm more inclined to be contrarian in small field contests than in large field contests. Just that the way that you're contrarian is going to be different. So in the slant, a lot of my lineups, if you look at them, when I play 100 into the slant, they don't look ridiculously contrarian. Yeah, they're
Right.
contrarian in certain elements, but it's like, no, but I'm playing a 3+1, right? I'm playing a run. Like, the
Yeah.
correlation of the play, like, I'm playing. None of these players are single digit owned in my entire lineup. Yet the
Right.
combination has a high ceiling and is unique because
Right.
not enough people are playing 3+1s. Not enough people are correlating. Not enough people are making these types of builds. Yet in the high stakes, they are making those builds and they are basing it on projections. So now the top projected guys start getting even more owned. So even though I'm going to win less often, it makes even more of a sense for me to just, like, X out 3 guys and then build whatever the best projected, stack from there that has the best ceiling, 80th percentile outcome, because it's easier to exploit. Because I'm playing against people that are playing 2% better projections than what I have.
Right.
But
Since
is
you
it
talk
that is
about
it that
building.
much of a difference that in a 4,000 person field, 400 person field,
Right.
like to me that's the to me, I mean, me and Eric talk about it all the time. To me,
Yeah.
that's the exploit in higher stakes contests, is that the that most of
You only
those
really have to
players
get
are not
one.
paying
Right.
attention enough that and make I think DFS gets
Mhm.
solved, quote unquote, when there's more automated efficient ways to build lineups based on contest.
Right. Right.
Because I think the main reason why someone like Alex doesn't do it as much is because they're just building out. I'm going to build a 150 set, and my top projected lineup is going into that contest, and my top 20 goes into there. Because when you're playing all the slates on all the sites, to now itemize it down by contest just doesn't become. If you're making a 5 to 7% return on average, 4%, whatever, on millions of dollars worth of volume, why
Mhm.
fuck with it, right?
Exactly.
You're still right. Empire Maker could put his one lineup into everything and still make money. Me, I'm trying to exploit it by going, well, I'm going to play this type of lineup into that contest and this type of lineup into, and I'm optimizing for the contest type, but I'm only doing it because I'm playing less lineups and less slates and less sites. When
Mhm.
I end up playing, when I play multiple, like when I'm playing baseball, and I try to play try to do that on multiple sites,
Mhm.
I end up deferring back to the 121 single entry on DraftKings. It's just whatever my top lineup projected is going to be. Now,
Yeah.
all the lineups are built for the large field, so I know I have enough leverage for the small field. but I'm not specific. Maybe that's not a good lineup for that contest. Maybe the fourth lineup is a better, but it doesn't project as well. So it's like I get stuck in that paradox. But I'm hoping in Run the Sims 2.0 for you to solve that. I just want to pay you to do it for me. To give me the tool that allows me to do it so I don't have to fuck around in fucking Excel. Or have to learn R or some bullshit.
No, I think that's a really good idea. And you mentioned stacking earlier and that being optimal, obviously, in the slant, and would obviously agree with that. What's interesting if you look at nut lineups, which obviously is not the goal.
Nut lineups, a lot of times nut lineups have no stacks in it.
No stack, right, exactly. It's going to be the quarterback. He spread it out a lot, and sure, his guys did good, but somebody else did better because there's a crap ton of wide receivers on the player pool, right? So, I was hoping to be able to extract some stuff for stacks, but it's like there's not a lot there if we're looking at optimals, which I think is pretty interesting. A good point to remember, like, the whole idea of stack is, especially like a 3+1, you're giving up a little bit of upside there. Like you could probably play two better wide receivers independently of one another, but the correlation is just well worth it.
Right, and in the smaller field contest, you actually want to be more correlated. You want to be you want to limit because you don't need the nut lineup. You just need you want to get maybe 2 or 3 things right, and if those 2 or 3 things are right and they hit their 80th percentile, you win first place out of 500 people, right?
Exactly.
And then in a 100,000 person contest, it's almost like whoever's the highest scoring tight end, you're going to need them. Whoever's the highest scoring wide receiver, you're going to need, no matter what happened in the game, you're probably going to need some random dude that he put up 38 points and no one else in the game had a good game. So if you stacked that game, you didn't win, but you needed Corey Davis, right? You needed like that one guy, the third receiver, right? And it has to be owned enough, right? The 1.4% owned this guy.
Yep.
That put up such an outlier. But that's why the nut lineup. Do you think people are going to get confused that don't understand that if they want to make the nut lineup, that if they're not playing the right contest size, then who cares?
Yeah, the nut lineup's not necessarily the goal. So that's kind of a teaching point for sure. Yeah. I do have a question for you that's not super related to what we've talked about so far, but it's related to cash games. When you're talking about, let's just say, the best player in the world in NFL cash games and compare them to, somebody who does, really well at the lower stakes, they're, plus 7% ROI cash game player. What would you set the line at if those two players could play against one another 10,000 times, a large enough sample where you'd find out.
So who are the two players?
I'm
not exactly.
Empire Maker's your number one cash guy.
I don't. Not necessarily that. I don't know. Not necessarily
agree
with that.
You have a different recommendation?
No, I don't care who the player. No, but what you're describing is a 7% ROI low stakes cash player.
Yeah, versus
a high stakes cash player versus a profitable high stakes cash player.
What's a fair line for that?
Well, I think 7% is quite low for the low stakes.
Okay.
Like just to put things into perspective, at the lowest stakes, which I can't play on DraftKings anymore, my cash double ups head to heads was somewhere between 12 and 14%.
Okay, let's use that then. Let's say it's Jordan then. What's Jordan versus Empire Maker?
I would set the line at Empire Maker probably minus 103.
So pretty close to a coin flip.
Right, but it would be close enough that the rake would eat anything that we did.
Gotcha. I was super intrigued when he was it last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember. When he was offering plus 110 to anybody, like essentially he was going to pay the DraftKings rake on that.
Right. Now, I would play him.
You'd play him at plus 110.
Yeah, I'd play him at plus 110. It'll essentially end up being would it be see the question would come in for the sample size, would it be worth the variance? It wouldn't. Right? Because the variance would be ridiculous.
Right. You wouldn't 16 slates or whatever.
Right. It still would be ridiculous.
Right.
You give me that against someone that's way worse than that, then I don't mind the like when the variance, we're talking about such a razor thin edge. In order to realize that edge, we have to play like thousands of times. So why, and especially if you're going to play high stakes, like why would I risk $5,000 a slate?
Sure.
On a very small, he's paying the rake and I have a small edge And good luck realizing that in 17 weeks. I mean, like,
Right.
it would be a risk management issue with me, not
Not an EV issue,
not
a
an
risk
EV issue,
management issue.
right?
I'm with you there, because I was like, that's actually a pretty good offer, for a lot of people, I would think, to take plus 110 from an EV perspective. But from a risk perspective, obviously you've got to have a pretty good size bankroll to be able to swing something like that.
Right. I mean, but to me, those are the two things that I'm aiming that I'm willing to sacrifice EV for lower risk if it's proportionally
Right.
better for me, which is the main reason why I may not play as many lineups. I may play much smaller percentage of my bankroll, because like I could run simulations out on these on my results and go, damn, this year could have gone this way or that way, and they both would have been within one standard deviation. I'm like, I,
Hmm.
like it's like, I think I'm a good player. I mean, it make
Right.
the math makes you question on even if you're a good player,
Yeah.
because the range of outcomes is so wide. I put my contests through, like, I could go last year and put my content and simulate it all out, to some extent, not the most accurate extent, but to some extent, and
Mhm.
go, well, based on this, I my within one standard deviation, right? Within that 68% middle range, uh,
Mhm.
I I could have been down, I could have been up, $480,000 or down $140,000, and that
Mhm.
would have been within normal, and that's a $500,000
Right.
range within a statistically significant sample size. And I
Yeah.
go, well, what did I actually make? Well, I made
Mhm.
26,000. It's like, is that the median? Is that like? But I could
Right.
the same exact lineups in the same contest could have been in either direction. And then I look and I go the year before, and it comes out to I played less volume. Now it's a $250,000 range.
Right.
And then you go through that and go within one standard deviation. I go back 6 years of me playing, and it's like playing the same exact way. I could be up a $1.5 million or down a $500,000, and that would have both been within some type of expected range. And it's
Right.
like, if I told you that I'm 6 years in and I'm down a $500,000, you'd be like, why the fuck are you listening to that guy, right?
Yeah.
But
You're an
it
idiot.
statistically, that I could play the same exact way, and that could have happened. So
Exactly.
so that's what that conundrum happens to me, where I go through all these sims and I look at CSVs and I go, some of these lineups are so close to one another that it just the coin flip on which lineup is going to. It's in 6v6, and they
Hmm.
both have the same similar expected value. It just matters on what's going to happen today. And
Exactly.
then it's just a matter of, oh, well, I played for 6 years, 300 days a year, 1,800 days. If I do that coin flip all that many times, like, how much money do I have at the end? Well, I could be massively unprofitable. I could still
Yeah.
be massively unprofitable,
Well, and the worst thing that could happen to a bad player is to get lucky early and to think that you're good, and then you
and that
find out
why
that
you
you're
know how
not
many
good.
times that happens a lot.
I know it does. I've seen that happen at casinos and sports books and DFS alike. You get a little bit hot early, and then you get overconfident, and it it can absolutely swing everything because you'll look at your lifetime winnings. You hit the milli maker like the eighth week you ever played DFS, and you're going to think that you're a god. You
Right.
know,
Or you're set. You win the Millie Maker one. The Millie Maker is the
it's
most
almost tough to
negative
lose that.
EV contest there is until you win it.
Exactly.
Right.
So
But
so the key is just win it.
right, just bink it. Just who cares? Just do
Right.
it. But that's the main point. But thinking in those terms of how you could still play for 6 years plus EV lineups. Now, obviously, the larger the sample size goes on, the more likely that you're going to be profitable. That's the law of large numbers. But that's why, to me, it's the most important to figure out whether or not your lineup is plus EV or not in comparison to other lineups in the
Right.
contest, and why a tool that simulates the contest that would be publicly available to people would be to me would be the tool of tool would be the thing.
We'll stop DFS content once that comes out.
No, well, the problem is that 95% of people wouldn't fucking use it.
Still wouldn't use it.
Right. That's the thing that I rely on, the fact that 95% of people still
And then
fuck it.
people would be duping with each other on those simulated lineups, and now
Right.
you've got a whole new problem.
Right. No, because now you could get leverage off the simulated line. Because now you look and it's like, oh, people are going to be playing these $1.64 plus
Yeah.
EV 5x standard deviation lineups that like come in once in a blue moon, and I'm just gonna jam the the $1.20 range that people aren't playing with the slower until they learn how to balance that. And then you go the other direction, right? So really, it comes down to as long as the market does not efficiently do what that equilibrium, if you want to call it the Nash equilibrium, as long as the market is off of that, there's always going to be arbitrage opportunities. The question comes in DFS though is how long do you have to play to realize it?
Exactly.
Right. That to me that's if we could just play 10,000 slates a day.
Maybe we'll have a sample size.
Right. Then now if we could play this MLB slate tonight like 10,000 times, and I could just build lineups and just replay it 10,000 times, then I'd be wildly profitable because then it'd just be easy at that point.
Exactly. So maybe DraftKings will start doing more of these Madden slates, and we can actually get 10,000 contests a day going.
Can we do it for the Madden Sims?
My stuff? I don't.
Do you do the video game Sims?
No, I don't do no sim projections.
How about all the other sports?
Oh, so we're focusing just on football right now, but I actually wanted to ask you, what sport do you think makes sense for Sport 2 for Run the Sims?
Well, I think it's more important that you make the tool that I'm suggesting.
Okay, so we'll do that first, and
Right.
then we'll expand to Sport 2. I've got one in my head, but where do you think simulation would be the most powerful?
If you're going to do play-by-play?
Yeah, or whatever the equivalent is for that particular sport.
I would probably say baseball.
Yeah,
I think basketball is the least.
Yeah,
important.
Basketball's least, and the information so last second too. I don't know. You'd have a really tough time keeping it up to date and accurate. And but baseball definitely seems to make sense. I think MMA would be a lot of fun too, because the fights are obviously they're kind of binary in the way they work. You could start by essentially simulating the winner of the round and the type, right? So and then backfill that simulation up with some randomized amount of points based on styles and that sort of thing.
Golf would be useful for that also. Basically, the higher variant sports, because the obviously, like you said, in the very beginning, people are building lineups even when they're using content and tools too much based around medians and not based around outlier, the 20th and 80th percentile ranges. And the thing is, and someone asked me even last week in the MMA Discord on Roto Grinders on the same type of mentality that I do during the pregame show of like, how much projection are you willing to give up for X amount of ownership, which makes sense in that type of sport. But in MMA, who cares about the median? No one's hitting these medians. The median is like, no, these aren't normal. Like MMA fighters don't have normal distributions. Right. Like it's the most obvious thing to see that they can't possibly have normal distributions because some guy gets beaten in the first round, you're dead. Right? Yeah. They're like binomial. They're like two humps type of thing. PGA is the same way. In full field cut events, like you'll see median projections 68. When does this guy hit? If he misses the cut, he has 24. If he makes the cut, he has 92. I mean, to me, the simulations would be much more beneficial. But obviously in golf, you have no benefit of like correlation, really. People have tried to do correlations, but truthfully, I think it's a lot of noise. Yeah. Long hitters, they go tee times, like maybe for the weather, maybe. To run simulations like that. But I still think for all the sports, running the contest-based simulations are more valuable. I mean, because you don't even have to do the projections. You could just say, we don't have any projections. Just upload your own projections. You don't have to do play-by-play. You do just Monte Carlo it. It's
Right.
definitely not as complicated as play-by-play simulation. And then just here's a tool, and then there you go, and you put in your own ownership. You could build your own ownership. You maybe because some sites now, some optimizers allow you to aggregate projections. So
Right.
maybe instead of upload your own projections, it's like, well, I'm going to upload 5 sets of projections, and you give me an aggregate and let me simulate that out,
Hmm.
right? And maybe you weigh certain projections better than I just see so many ways that you could add to this tool that you're the main to me the main selling point. I know it's nerdy. I know it doesn't it's one of those things that for 95% of the audience isn't a selling point until it
Hmm.
becomes until they understand why it's so valuable
Right.
is the fact that you in Go you could run 10,000 sims of whatever on AWS for anything like to me that's
Huge. Yeah.
I want that. I want to be and then you give me the option. You get 5 different sports, 4 different sites, and next thing you know, it's run essentially it's run the Sims. Just
Right.
like it's a site where you go to run the Sims and there do whatever you want with it. Just here you go, run the Sims.
Hmm. No, I like that. I think that's really cool to be able to put a raw number in terms of EV. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm interested in that. We're
Did
gonna
you ever
have
think of this? Am I just kind of like am I just saying things that you didn't even think of or anything?
well, no, it's a matter of like
I
prioritization.
know,
Like,
because you're doing a lot of other stuff with the site as well. You have different tools and stuff
yeah.
up there.
So we're trying to perfect this simulation process of the slate, and that means really honing in on the inputs, really honing in on that process, really, and we're taking that. Like, we run the data, once, and then we can create so many different utilities off of that same data. And when I say run it once, we're obviously going to run it again and again and again later, but one set at a time. And so there's no shortage of things that we're still trying to figure out how to slice up and present in a new way. Like when you think about passing yardage props, like I've got passing yards on every player for 10,000 simulations. You get minus 110 on Daniel Jones over under 220 passing yards. I can tell you in our simulations at least, he hits the over 61% of the time, smash it. So
Do you have an overlay of that? I know you have like a parlay odds. I see some betting stuff on here.
yeah, it's not launched yet, so it'll launch August 15th. But that's it's a pretty cool tool.
Right, I see the hedge bet calculator, middle calculator, odds calculator. Would you have an import from the books?
That's what we're hoping to get added before the due date. So
So it will show the results of the simulations and then be able
it
to.
currently exists where you can manually key, you type in the player name, type in the line, type in the juice, and then we'll pull the data and you'll see a distribution curve and we'll color it red and green for the over and the under based on where the value lies.
Right now, I wanted it to be even more automated.
I know you do, Jordan. I
Pull in
can't
pull
help
in
you
all
with
the
that.
odds.
Can I get one thing solved at a time?
No, you have to get
Please.
everything solved.
I just released a site 7 days ago, and I already had to make 4 updates for Jordan.
Right. Well, the betting stuff you don't need to do. I'm not going to do that. Because once you start hammering these fucking prop bets, they're gonna fucking kill you. So what it doesn't matter any. Like anyone that thinks they're gonna make a ton of money on prop betting is sorely mistaken.
I think there's ways to stay off the radar a little bit, but
Not for enough money. It's not enough money.
well, I'm also hopeful that prop betting will actually become more liquid and less open towards less just the pure marketing arm. Like there's no reason if everybody's super into fantasy football, for example, and wants to bet props, that those wouldn't eventually become liquid markets and efficient markets, right?
You would think so, but that relies on the technology back end of these companies that want to make them efficient.
Right. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's no reason to not hammer them while you can, for
Yeah,
sure.
but it's for beer money. I mean, if you start, you're not going to be able to get money down.
Some
If you
people
get
like
money
beer,
down, you're going to
Jordan.
get fucking limited.
Some people like beer.
Right, well, which is fine. But I think a better way to put it, Justin, is that the expectation that people give out shouldn't be that, oh, you can make tons of, because a lot of these lines are fucking inefficient as hell. I mean, like they're really bad, and you could really you could hammer them. It's just a matter of when do you get limited? I mean, when do you get limited? And even disguising your play isn't worth the raw money. Like there's a different, like if you want to put down $1,000+ on sides and totals, closing lines, and look like a square, that's fine. But I mean, you're bleeding money in order to get what? $100 bet down on some like 4% expected value fucking prop. I mean, like it just the raw money. If you could get $5,000 down, sure, but you're not going to be able to. So like to me, like even that cat and mouse game, like isn't. I mean, obviously I'm in Kentucky, so I can't even legally bet on the legal. But
same
it's,
here in North Carolina. But I do think you can obviously shop around at books. There's you're going to try to find spots. You get banned at one, well, fine, that's one off the list, and keep going to the rest. But there's no reason not to. I wouldn't say.
If you're low stakes and playing for beer money, there's no reason not to. There's definitely reason not to if your plan is to play is to bet at higher stakes.
What if you're going to bet other stuff at higher stakes?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, but that to me
don't blow your chance to get in good at markets that are still beatable. But like I don't know. I don't really consider NFL sides to be very beatable.
No, me neither.
So,
but I'm talking about in the future. I'm talking like I don't want to bust my nut early and then have no accounts available to me.
Yeah, none of us do, I don't think.
Right. Well, I'm waiting, but you know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for the peer-to-peer stuff.
Yes.
And not the exchange. People think it's no. I'm talking about the peer. I'm talking about prop betting as a DFS lineup, right? As like that type of, it's like put together your 8-bet card, and you put in $5, and whoever gets the highest whatever score wins the Millie Maker. It's still the little amount of money to win a lot.
Right.
But because you could, I'm going to bet on the Giants -115. Like that's, wow. You get, I mean, it's not, that's why people bet on parlays. They bet on an 8-leg parlay that has so much hold that I don't know why the fuck mathematically you should never be doing this.
Right.
But they want to turn a little bit amount of money into a lot of money. And they also understand the basic bets. And they don't want to have to know the scoring system of DFS. And they don't want to have to have salaries or anything. They're just like, can I just bet on 8 things and compete against other people? It's like, okay. Because once that comes in and the sites, the books take their, 10% rake or whatever out of it, then it just comes down to, well, everyone's taking this prop, right?
Right.
What's the direct leverage of this over prop?
You have to say now it's just game theory. It's DFS all over.
Right. It's DFS all over. Right. Everyone's taking Justin Jefferson over 67 yards. That bet on a card is going to be 28% owned in this contest.
Exactly.
Right? The under bet is going to be 4% owned. It's like, how often does this happen? And then you go, well, I get my leverage by playing the Justin Jefferson under, and then I correlate that with the defensive interception bet, right? You could, right? Because the Kirk Cousins under, there, now we're talking.
There you go. So you really just want DFS, but from new people's money.
Yeah, that pretty much, yeah. I want an easier version I want a DFS for the sports bettors that think DFS is too complicated.
There you go.
Because it could even be like something like the Westgate comp. Like even if it was something like there's 14 games on this week, and you just have to pick the winners. Like it doesn't even matter what the lines are. Like obviously there's going to be dupes in a large contest, but I mean you could obviously project ownership for that. 100,000 entries, and the Chiefs are a 17-point favorite. They're going to be in 68% of cards, and it's like how often do they win versus their opponent? And then you come up with betting, a 14-legged parlay that actually pays more based on what everyone else is playing. I mean, it's still the same thing. It's still game theory.
DFS is just parlays in its own right.
Right, kind of.
Yeah.
Right, same thing.
So we'll add your 4 new products to the site as soon as possible, and then we'll launch this new peer-to-peer betting contest format.
Right, yeah, but that's when you played all. So you have to make contests.
We're getting quite a list here.
Right. But you have to admit what I'm saying with the contest simulations. Like,
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it.
that should have
Do
been
I
like
have
the
to owe
begin.
you
That
any
should have been the
royalties once
first
I make
thing.
that?
That should have been the first thing.
Yeah.
I hope people that are listening to me that already do this are like, I hope he doesn't listen to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm ruining everything.
That will ruin DFS.
No, as long as 95% of people don't do it.
We'll have to put like a 5K price tag on something like that.
Do you think I wouldn't pay that?
Maybe
I'm dead serious. I probably would.
I got one subscriber already.
Trust me, there you go. You paid. It pays for itself.
I didn't even have to offer you a promo code.
No, I'll use my promo code. Just pay. I'll just pay whatever you want.
There you go.
Because that type of the thing that I'm describing obviously is extremely complicated to do
right.
without being that good at being that good at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm sure what I know because I know other people that do this. So and I do it in some rudimentary way. But yeah, I'm totally into saving as much time as possible and just paying for something.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like something machine learning would be tailor-made for. If you could get a machine to learn how people make lineups, because that would do better than, random.
Can it be any machine?
I
got a popcorn machine. Can I teach it how to make lineups?
Well, there's only one way to find out, Jordan.
Machine lineups. How good do they look?
Popcorn machine lineups are a little all over the place. Not gonna lie.
So what other machine? Sewing machine.
Sewing machine.
They go old school.
International business machine would probably be your best bet.
And you get Watson.
Yeah, Watson or Alexa, one of the two surely can figure it out.
Is there a reason why Go goes so quicker than anything else?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really don't. It's extraordinarily powerful though.
Because I don't think I've ever heard anyone.
I had never heard of it until
about
6 months ago. Yeah, never heard of it.
No, I heard of the language. I've
never heard of it until 6 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could do it in Perl. I could do it. You know how long it would take to do in Perl? It would be stupid. Like I don't know. Those are the languages I used to know. Like I'm a 20. I feel like now.
You're dating yourself, I think.
No. What I feel like now is what I felt 20 years ago when I met someone that did COBOL.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, a COBOL program. It's like, are there still mainframes around? I guess so. Yeah. I guess COBOL is, useful. And now I'm mentioning stuff like Perl and ASP.
I know nothing about any of the programs you just mentioned.
Really, Web 1.0, like the Netscape Navigator days.
Oh yeah, it was definitely not doing any programming at that point.
No, it was mostly just JavaScript and Perl and like making banners change, right? Little flashing things.
There you go. Yeah.
Stuff like that. runthesims.com. People can sign up for free right now, right?
Yeah, it's completely free, and
right now it's completely free.
Yeah, right now, and it'll stay that way until we launch our premium tools. And the premium package comes live August 15th. And if anybody goes ahead and signs up now, you'll join the Founders Club that locks in your price annually for life. So the prices will go up. They'll go up $50 on July 31st. So hop on in there.
Well, it'll go up to 5,000 at some point, right?
5,000 next year, obviously. when we introduce our new Print Fest 3000.
So what is okay? So there's free. So there's still going to be free stuff there.
Yeah, free stuff there all the time. But the good stuff is paywalled there.
So what's the free stuff? Tell me what the free stuff is.
Yeah, man, let me tell you real quick. You would not care about this at all. We have a projection builder up there right now for season-long projections. So if you're into season-long DFS and want to... I see you snoring. If you're into season-long projections and want to update target shares and pace numbers and stuff like that and see what it does to different players, that's free. We've got a stats hub that's free. We've got online betting calculators. Those will always be free. So are our stats. And so best ball rankings, season-long rankings, downloadable projections if you just want to skip to the answers of the test. So all that stuff's free. Anything you would need for season-long, that's free right now.
So your median projections are free. So I could just download your projections.
The season long
Oh,
projections.
season long. Oh, not the daily.
Yeah, not the good stuff, man.
Okay,
Anything
so
DFS.
then what do you pay for? I also see you have a bankroll tracker also.
Yeah, so this will be similar to Roto Tracker. In many ways, I'm trying to make sure we're not directly copying them because it's hard when we're trying to just produce the same type of information, right? Which is like a lifetime understanding of your wins and losses and where they come from. There's so many tables to put them in, and so yeah, it'll basically be a uploadable format where you can throw in your DraftKings, FanDuel, CSVs. Super Draft, Fantasy Draft, even though that one's defunct in Yahoo. So throw those all in there as CSVs, and you'll get some really fancy printouts of your lifetime earnings and stuff like that. So understand where you're winning, where you're losing, and tailor your play based on that. And so the premium NFL package is bundled up with the bankroll tracker for $249 right now. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and create a promo code right now called DFS. How about we do that? The promo code DFS will get you $50 off that package. That's a good deal, right?
That sounds fine to me.
Yeah, promo code
when
DFS.
I join, can I get a one that gives me $4,950 off?
We'll look into that. I should owe you some sort of royalty for that brilliant idea if we get that launched.
No, there's no royalty, but this is what other people do. There's no reason to give me anything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
I just want what other sharp players have. I want it and not have to fucking try to.
And
do
so,
it myself.
that's a good point. This is what other sharp people are doing. If you heard Lulz, I mean, Brian Hooper is doing this or some variation very close to it for what he's doing. And so, granted, he has his own layer on top of that process too. But the people who are doing this for a living are implementing some form of simulation, and to me, that's kind of the next big obstacle to tangle with, right?
What's this rangefinder player comparison tool?
Okay, you'll love this one, Jordan. You stuck on.
No, I think I know what this is. I think I saw the description. Is this what I use when people ask me questions about 2v2s?
Yes, exactly.
It does is add the two medians together and just tell me which one's higher.
No. So what it'll look like is imagine side one and side two here. And side one is Aaron Rodgers plus Devontae Adams. Side two is Patrick Mahomes plus Tyreek Hill because you have a ton of money to spend for whatever reason. And you'll get a distribution curve of each of those sides laid over one another and a win rate associated with those two sides. So you'll see the Mahomes Hill side wins 57% of the time, and the Adams Rodgers side
in total points.
In total DraftKings points,
right?
Or whatever site you choose to implement the scoring of. So this could help you obviously in season-long fantasy as well. Just plug those people in with your scoring format, but obviously super helpful for DFS.
Right, but most likely most of these distributions are going to be fairly normal, right?
Somewhat, yeah. Most of the time they are going to be relatively normal. Where it gets a little interesting is where you'd have like one stacked combo versus one unstacked combo. That's kind of interesting too.
So this is not just plain 2v. Like if it's two unrelated players to each other versus two unrelated players to each other. Mm-hmm. I mean, other than maybe a very small marginal percentage, the sum of the two medians are going to be the higher win. 51%.
That's a good shorthand for sure. Right? But it could help you ultimately make a leverage decision too, right? So, right. If it's 57-43, but we think the ownership is crazily in favor of the 57 side, then we will fade that high ownership and take our 43% chance on the other side, right? So, but it's 2v2s, 1v1s, 9v9s. Like if you want to put in your 9-player cash lineup and say, well, like the Roto Grinders optimal is this, I would expect that to be a relatively popular cash lineup, maybe.
Oh, so you could do so it's not just 2v2s. You could do like 9. You could do the whole lineups.
Do 9v9s, yeah. How about that?
And is this based on is this based on whatever sim? Okay, here's a question. Keep on going with all the options. Can I save simulations?
Can you save?
So for instance, this is what I'm asking. Like for this 9v9 for the cash liner, for instance, you're building a cash and you're trying to see which wins more often based on 10,000 simulations of
Yes.
whatever the target share, whatever that you got on your site. Now, let's
Yes.
say I change. What happens if I change all the target shares and I make another 10,000 simulations?
That's not coming with you to the rangefinder. You're going to have to be leaning on my stuff.
Oh, okay. So the rangefinder is not based on my custom simulation.
Exactly.
It's only based on yours.
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
It's just,
add that to your list. You got another
number
thing
5.
to your list.
Now 5 and a whole new program to launch. Yep.
But you understand why? You understand why I asked? Am I asking too many questions?
That's a pretty cool tool, right?
Yeah, no. If you could do it right, sure.
Oh gosh.
I'm picky.
No kidding. Jeez.
No, because why? Because here's the question: why do I care about comparing players to each other if I put in my own projections? Well, then if it doesn't work, then what the fuck's the point?
Well, you just told me a minute ago you don't want to put in your own projections.
No, but I'm not saying I put in my own. I'm putting in some other site's projections or some other person.
Why you don't trust me, Jordan? We're supposed to trust
I don't know.
each
Should
other.
I trust you?
I'm asking you for money. We obviously have some trust.
Should I trust you?
Yeah,
What happens if I want to aggregate? I want to aggregate yours with 5 others and then upload that.
This has been the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. I'm Coach Jordan Cooper.
Do you think what I'm asking for is obviously the stuff that I'm asking for is stuff that like sharp players do, but not necessarily everyone does.
Exactly.
So it's
like
so you're joking around that I'm asking for so much shit.
We're going to build for the 95% first, and then we're going to build for the remaining 5.
No, I want to make the money off the 95% first.
I do too.
I don't want you to make them better and then go, oh, well, now that I'm doing this, what's the other 5%? It's like, no, I want to keep the other 5% secret.
Yeah.
But that's what Brian says. He doesn't see his attitude is he doesn't want any monsters to be made.
Exactly. No, I want to create monsters.
No, with what I'm talking about, we're going to create a lot of fucking monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that's what your site should have been called.
The Monsters?
No, Monster Creator.
Yeah, like it. Well, I might go ahead and book that domain if it's available on GoDaddy.
Monstercreator.com.
Yeah.
And people don't know what it is. It's like, oh, you go there and you run simulations. Oh, no, this is what you create monsters.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a letdown once you find out you're just making simulations.
Right. Of monsters. That's what you simulate. You simulate new users on each platform. Right?
There you go.
Right. So like if last year if your simulations were accurate, you would have had Whistles Go Woo win a lot of money, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Now, we needed quite a few simulations to get there, I think.
Right. Okay. Run the Sims. Promo code DFS.
Yeah, let's do that.
Just really, you didn't have that promo code already? That seems like an obvious one.
No, Theory of DFS. We want to link it back so people can
Theory
remember.
of DFS.
Yeah, no, we'll do code DFS in homage to your title here.
Okay, I don't get any money for this though.
No, you're unpaid affiliate here.
I'm an unpaid affiliate by choice.
That's right.
By choice.
Exactly.
That's why I've gotten emails for sponsorship on this show. I'm like, the CPM rate is not high enough for me to sell out for shit that I don't use.
Oh, well,
but maybe I use this. I could write this out. I could write this off on my taxes.
I was gonna say that wasn't a glowing endorsement for Run the Sims right there.
Well, I don't know. I had you on. It has to mean something. I may get this. I can write it off on my taxes, so I think I could do it.
Exactly. Guys, if nothing else, it's a tax write-off. Do me the favor and sign up for $199.
Okay.
Go get the bundle package, $50 off, code DFS.
The bundle? What the hell's the bundle?
The bundle, the one with the all-access NFL and the bankroll tracker.
Oh, you have to pay for the bankroll tracker individually?
Yeah, come on, man.
That kills my bankroll. That's
exactly.
not a good thing. Is the first thing when you sign up for the bankroll tracker shows you the minus $100 you paid for it?
Yeah, exactly.
You get that too. But I mean, that's needed. I mean, other than Rototractor, do you know of any bankroll tracker worth a fuck?
I've never heard of any other.
Right. And the RG one got discontinued, so.
Oh, really?
They don't support it anymore.
Okay.
Or you could upload and it doesn't. I don't know what it does now. What it should do, they should not support it anymore and make it so that on every upload it says that you're like 1,000,000% profitable.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Right. And we have the simulations to prove it. People can follow you, Justin Freeman 18 on Twitter, right?
That's me.
You're tweeting out a bunch of stuff. Are you doing are you not doing the Showdown shows anymore?
To be determined on next year for Showdown. I want to make sure.
Next year, it's coming up. It's a month away.
Dude, come on! I've got to make sure we don't. I got to make sure this beautiful new site gets all the tender love and care it needs, and these projections are honed in. So, yeah, I still would love to do the show. I'm trying my best to avoid commitments of any type over the next couple months.
It's a big project.
It is. That's a huge project.
Yes, a huge project. It's something that I would definitely not do.
you take people's money other ways, Jordan.
Right? Yeah. This seems like way too much work. I like just coming up with stuff, spending 80 hours on one thing, and then just selling it forever.
That sounds good to me.
That's what I do. Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. You could buy the 15-hour audio DFS Masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.